beneath the crimson sky of Alzarin. Smoke curled above the shattered trees like ghostly fingers reaching for the heavens. By the air was thick with the stench of scorched earth, metal, and blood. Commander Raylan Voss pushed through the tangled undergrowth, his heavy boots crunching over alien moss as he scanned the wreckage scattered across the jungle floor. The battle had ended hours ago, but the silence felt too heavy, too wrong. His HUD flickered with static. His comes dead sense. The last energy surge took out his squad's gear. He was alone, or so he thought, until a faint pulse of violet light blinked from under a collapsed tree trunk. He knelt, brushing aside leaves and blackened debris, revealing a small skiff, the sleek kind used by alien nobility. Its hull was cracked open, scorched from plasma fire, and inside, barely breathing, lay a figure draped in silver and gold armor, unlike anything Raylan had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on water, marked with lines that glowed faintly with every fading heartbeat. It was a Serati, unmistakably royal by her crest, but Raylan froze not in fear, but awe. She was beautiful and broken, a strange mix of power and fragility. Her breathing was shallow, her chest rising only slightly with each strained gasp. A voice echoed softly in his mind, not spoken, but felt like a whisper of wind. "Help me, Raylan." Blinked. "Telepathy," he muttered, and the voice came again, weaker this time. "Please." Against every regulation drilled into him, he reached out, lifting her head slightly, cueing her vitals with his broken scanner. Nothing human would survive such wounds, and no medkit was designed for a Serati body. But she was still alive, barely. Her veins were almost drained of the strange silver fluid Serati used as blood. Her body trembled, cold and limp, as if fighting to stay connected to the world. Raylan's instincts screamed for him to move, to leave, to call command, but something stronger held him there. He thought of the battles, the endless war, the faces of his fallen team, and, for once, he didn't want to follow orders. He wanted to save someone. He pulled a syringe from his medkit, hesitated, then drew his own blood. "If this kills you, I'm sorry," he whispered, pushing it gently into her arm, unsure what would happen, unsure why he was even trying. At first, nothing changed. Then her body arched slightly, and a soft gasp left her lips. Her eyes, silver with flecks of blues, napped open, staring directly into his. Light burst across her veins, running down her arms like fire, finding a trail of oil. Lane stumbled back, stunned, as the skiff around them shook with a sudden burst of energy. Her wounds slowly began to close, tissue mending itself with unnatural speed. "What the hell?" he muttered, watching in disbelief as her skin regained its shimmer and her fingers twitched with returning strength. But this was no ordinary healing. Something deeper was happening. She stared at him, her gaze now sharper, more aware. "Allah, you gave me your blood?" she asked, her voice raspy but clear. Raylan nodded slowly. "I thought it wouldn't work, but..." She sat up, slightly unsteady, touching her arm where the blood had entered. It did more than work. It changed. Me. They locked eyes, and in that moment, Raylan felt something shift. This wasn't just a wounded alien recovering. This was the beginning of something dangerous, something powerful, something impossible. Before he could say more, his wrist console crackled to life. Command breaking through with sharp urgency. "Commander Voss, report. We detected Serati energy readings near your position. Do not engage. Secure the area and await extraction." Raylan stared at the device, then at Thalara. The name had slipped into his mind without explanation, as if she had placed it there. "What now?" he asked, half to himself. She answered before he could think further. "They'll come for me. Now, they'll come for you too." Raylan stood slowly, checking the ammo in his pulse rifle, his heart racing. He didn't know what he had done. Not really. He had just acted on instinct. But one thing was clear. This was no longer just about survival. This was about something far bigger. And whatever was coming next. It had already begun. Raylan Voss crouched in the shadows of a massive stone pillar deep inside the jungle, his pulse rifle clutched tightly in his hands as rain poured from the dark sky, drenching him and the wounded Serati princess beside him. Lara hadn't spoken since her strange healing. Her skin still shimmered faintly, but the glow had settled into her veins like quiet lightning. Her eyes stayed closed, and her breathing was deep, slow, to calm for someone who had nearly died only hours ago. Raylan kept checking the scanner. On his wrist, though the screen flickered from water damage and interference, a single word flashed again and again. Hunted drones detected. They had to move, but the Lara wasn't ready. At least, he didn't think she was. Suddenly, her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes opened, and they no longer looked fully alien. He saw something human in them: emotion, understanding, memory. She sat up without help and spoke, her voice stronger now, yet strangely familiar. You dreamed of fire. You held your friend while he died. You blame yourself. Raylan froze, heart thudding. How do you know that? She let go of his wrist and looked away. I saw it. You gave me your blood. Something connected us. A strange pulse echoed in the air, a low hum like an engine idling somewhere unseen. The Lara tilted her head. They're close. 3 drones. Standard. Terran military pattern. Raylan raised an eyebrow. You can hear that? She nodded slowly. I can feel them. I don't know how, but I can. Raylan stood, glancing at the thick vines and moss-covered ruins around them. Then we need to leave. We'll head east. There's a ridge that might block their scanners. They started moving, weaving through trees and broken pillars of an ancient Serati structure, long swallowed by the jungle. As they walked, Raylan noticed the Lara barely made a sound. Okay? She moved like mist, graceful and precise, her feet gliding over wet roots and stone. Her armor, though damaged, seemed to pulse with new energy. You should be dead, Raylan said. Without turning, no one survives a crash like that. Stellara didn't answer right away. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. Your blood changed something in me. My people were created to be perfect, no mixing, no weakness. But now I feel stronger and different. A sudden screech cut through the rain. One of the drones had spotted them, its spotlight slicing through the mist. Raylan spun and fired, the bolt slamming into the drone's core. It exploded in mid-air with a burst of smoke and sparks. 2 more, he shouted. The Lara raised her hand, and before he could stop her, a wave of force rippled outward. The second drone spun out of the sky like a paper toy, slamming into a tree and bursting into flame. Raylan stared, jaw clenched in shock. What did you just do? She looked at her palm, blinking. Dano, star drone, hovered behind them, lining up a shot. Raylan turned to fire, but it was already too late until the Lara stepped forward and pointed at it. The drone froze in midair, trembling, then crumpled like a tin can and fell with a metallic crash. Silence returned to the jungle. Lara's chest rose and fell, her face pale, but her eyes glowed faintly. It's growing, she whispered. The power. It's not just healing me. It's changing me. Raylan reached out to steady her. We need answers. There's an old Serati. Ruin about 5 clicks east. Maybe something there can explain what's happening to you. They continued walking. The Lara stepped slower now, her mind clearly heavy with thoughts. The jungle thinned, and by nightfall, they reached a clearing where ancient stone arches rose from the ground like sleeping giants. The Lara walked ahead, touching one of the stones. Symbols lit up beneath her fingers, lines of energy running through the walls, glowing brighter with each step she took. This place knows me, she said. Okay, my ancestors built this before. The Great Fall, before the silence. Raylan followed her into the inner chamber, where a large circular platform rested in the center. Laura stepped onto it, and the platform rose a few inches, lights swirling around her. Then the air shimmered, and a holographic figure appeared. Another Serati, older, more regal. If you are seeing this, the figure said, then the final bond has been made. The last of the line carries the blood of the lost kin. Humanity was our forgotten seed. We're never meant to meet, but the stars have chosen differently. Raylan's breath caught in his throat. Wait, what? Humanity is connected to the Serati. The figure continued. The bond of blood unlocks the echo. With it, the starborn may rise those who are both. They will reshape what we could not. The image faded, and the lights dimmed. Delara stepped back, stunned. I don't understand. Why would they do this? Why would they send part of our race to a distant world and forget them? Raylan shook his head. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they knew a hybrid like you would be more powerful than either side alone. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Then a new sound joined at the heavy stomp of boots, the cold hum of powered armor. Terran soldiers, dozens of them. Raylan rushed to the entrance and saw lights moving through the trees. A voice barked through a megaphone. Commander Voss, surrender the Serati. You are in violation of Terran military code. Lay down your weapons. Delara stood beside him, fists clenched. Calm me, Raylan. They won't let me. Live, I'm something they fear. Raylan's jaw tightened. Dan, we don't let them take you. He activated a hidden panel on his rifle, triggering a remote charge on a nearby cliff. The explosion sent part of the ridge collapsing, cutting off the main path. But it wouldn't hold them for long. Thala raised her hand again. Okay. But this time her power surged. Uncontrollably, stones lifted off the ground. Trees bent under invisible pressure, and the entire ruin glowed with ancient energy. Raylan stepped back, shielding his eyes. Delara, stop. You'll burn out. She cried out, and the energy snapped back into her, sending her collapsing into his arms. He held her tightly, heart racing. You're not alone. Whatever's happening to you, we'll face it together. She looked up at him, eyes flickering between fear and something deeper. Then we must run, not just from your people, but from mine too. If they learn what I've become, they'll destroy us both. Raylan nodded, lifting her onto her feet. As they slipped into the jungle's shadows once more, the rain began to fall harder, washing away the blood, the heat, the battle, but not the questions, not the fear. Behind them, soldiers searched the ruins. Ahead, a mystery waited to unfold. Delara's powers were awakening, and the galaxy was about to feel it. Raylan and Delara moved quickly through the jungle as the sounds of Terran soldiers faded behind them, swallowed by thick trees and shadows. But neither of them spoke much. As they traveled, both caught in the weight of what they had just learned, humanity's forgotten link to the Serati. Strange power rising inside Delara, and the message that called her something new, the Starborn. As the sun set behind the clouds and the jungle dimmed into blue-gray mist, Delara suddenly stopped near a steep ridge, staring down at something half buried beneath moss and rock. There, she said, voice low. That's it. Raylan looked down and saw the entrance to what seemed like another ruin, but this one was older, more broken, almost hidden by time itself. The doorway was sealed by a large stone disc covered in glowing glyphs that flickered weakly as Delara approached. She knelt and touched the center of the seal, and the ground trembled softly as the door slid open with a slow, grinding sound, revealing a narrow stone staircase that led into cold, silent darkness. Without a word, they descended into the depths, their steps echoing in the quiet space as walls lit up one by one with pale blue light. The chamber below was vast, shaped like a dome, with carvings that spiraled around the walls in a language Raylan couldn't read, but Delara traced them with her fingers, her face pale. "This place is from before the Great War," she whispered, "when the Serati still ruled the stars. Before we turned on each other." In the center of the room stood a crystal pillar, cracked and dim, but as Thalara stepped close, it lit up with her presence, and a projection appeared, moving images showing great cities floating in the sky, Serati scientists experimenting with strange energy, and finally, a terrible scene: ships firing on each other in space, explosions ripping through planets, and a glowing child locked inside a stasis chamber, hidden away in a lonely corner of the stars. They feared what we could become, Delara said, staring at the images. They discovered that blending Serati and human DNA created something ... unstable, powerful. They tried to erase all records, destroy any attempts to bring the two together. My blood was never pure. I was the result of one such experiment. Raylan felt a chill crawl down his spine. But if that's true, then what about Earth? Was it part of their plan? Delara nodded slowly. A long time ago, some Serati believed the future needed balance, not control. They sent a seeder, kind to a distant world, where you would grow without us. But now, the old warnings are coming true. The blood has returned. She turned toward Raylan, her eyes glowing faintly again. Your blood woke something in me, something buried deep. We are connected, and through that connection, I'm changing into something my people once feared more than death itself. Raylan stepped back, trying to understand. Are you saying Q were made to be this? Delara lowered her gaze. Not made, hidden. A last chance. Before he could respond, a loud crack echoed through the chamber, and the ground shook. Dust rained from above as part of the ceiling crumbled, and a deep, guttural voice filled the air, coming from the crystal pillar, now pulsing with angry light. The no order sees. The no order hunts. All impurity must be purged. Raylan pulled his weapon instinctively, scanning the shadows. What the hell is that? Delara's face hardened. A safeguard. An old program. The no order was formed to erase anything that broke the Serati code of blood purity. It must have sensed me. Suddenly, parts of the wall cracked open, and metallic limbs unfolded as ancient guardians activated machines, shaped like spiders and serpents, glowing red and moving fast. Raylan fired at the first, hitting it in the core, but more swarmed out of the walls. Delara raised her hands, trying to push them back with energy, but the strain showed on her face, and her knees buckled as the power surged out of control. Lane pulled her behind a stone pillar, blasting at the machines as they closed in. We're not going to hold them off forever, he shouted. Delara gasped for air, eyes wide with panic. There's a memory stone behind the pillar. ... We need it. Raylan dashed forward, rolling under a lunging metal serpent and grabbing a small glowing shard from the base of the crystal pillar. The moment he touched it, a flash of images burst into his mind's Alora's childhood in a floating palace. Her isolation, the fear in her tutor's eyes when she displayed strange abilities, the moment she discovered she was not like the others, not fully Serati, and the day they tried to kill her by sabotaging her escape ship. He stumbled back, dazed, but Delara pulled the stone from his hand and pressed it against her chest. Light exploded around them, and every machine in the room froze, then crumbled to dust. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Raylan fell to one knee, breathing hard. What? ... What was that? Delara stood slowly, her aura stronger, clearer now. The truth, Das stone held my memories, sealed until the moment I was ready to face them. Now I know who I am. Raylan looked up at her. And who is that? Delara stared at the fading light. I am the last of the ancient blood, and the first of the new. A sudden beep came from Raylan's wrist, console signal restored. But before he could respond, another message arrived, not from his command, but from an encrypted source. They know. The null order is coming. Flee, hide her, or watch the galaxy burn. Raylan met Thalara's gaze. Who sent this? Thalara looked at the crumbled machines. Someone who remembers. Someone who fears what I've become, and what I might do. Outside, the jungle roared with thunder, but Raylan no longer feared the storm. What truly scared him was the fire rising inside Thalara's soul, and the battle waiting just beyond. The stars. The sky above Twilight Pass burned orange as the sun began to set behind the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows over the narrow valley below, where Raylan and Thalara stood with a small group of defenders, preparing for what could be their final stand, their eyes scanning the ridge for signs of the enemy that was sure to come. The message they received 2 nights ago had warned them the no order was moving fast, and now they had no time left to run, no place left to hide. Only one way forward, and that was to hold the pass until help could arrive, though none of them truly believed help would come. Raylan moved along the old wall of cracked stone and broken turrets, checking the charge packs in each of the mounted plasma cannons, while giving quick orders to the militia, farmers, wanderers, deserters, and outlaws, all who had chosen to stand with the strange Serati princess and the human who had somehow changed her fate with the drop of his blood. Thalara stood at the edge of a tall ledge, her eyes closed, arms outstretched, her body glowing with a light that pulsed faintly with every beat of her heart. She was no longer just a royal fugitive. She was something more now, stronger, but also uncertain, still learning how to control the force that stirred deep inside her veins. A power neither Serati nor human had ever fully understood. Below them, the canyon twisted into a choke point, surrounded by sheer rock walls. It's a perfect place to hold off a larger force, but even with the advantage of terrain, they all knew they were outnumbered, and outgunned. The null order sent more than machines this time. They sent elite strike units and purge ships, all armed with ancient weapons, built to erase hybrids like Thalara from the galaxy's memory forever. As dusk fell and the sky turned dark purple, sensors picked up the first wave of movement, glowing. Red drones, flying low, scanning for life, followed by armored troops marching in rhythm, each step shaking the ground like a drumbeat of death. "They're here," Raylan said quietly, gripping his rifle tighter. Thalara opened her eyes, which now shone with a silver hue, and walked down the rocky steps to stand beside him. "I can feel them. Their minds are blank. No fear, no doubt. Only the mission." Raylan turned to her. "Then we stop the mission, no matter what." The first shot came from the cliffs as one of the defenders fired too early, hitting a drone that exploded in a flash of green sparks. And, just like that, the siege began. The null forces charged forward in perfect lines, their weapons glowing with blue heat, and the air filled with screams, fire, and the sound of battle. Raylan moved fast, dodging blasts and returning fire, shouting orders to keep the line tight. But even as they fought hard, the enemy never slowed. They pushed without pause, without fear, and began climbing the cliffs to flank the defenders. Thalara raised her hands, her body glowing brighter, and unleashed a wave of energy that knocked back a whole row of enemies, sending them tumbling down the rocks like broken dolls. But each time she used her power, it cost her more. Her face turned pale, and sweat poured down her brow. Raylan rushed to her side as another enemy squad broke through the lower defenses, but Thalara held up a hand. "I'm not done yet," she said, her voice trembling. She closed her eyes and let the power flow again, not as a blast, but as a shimmering wall of light that curved around the pass like a dome, slowing the enemy's advance and giving the defenders a moment to regroup. "We buy time," she whispered. "That's all we need." But just as they began to hope, the sky tore open with thunder. and a massive ship descended, black, silent, and shaped like a blade. The flagship of the Null Order, and from its belly dropped something worse than machines. A dark figure clad in armor that absorbed light, tall and still, with no face, only a cold voice that echoed across the canyon. Thalara, child of forbidden blood, surrender now and be erased with honor. No one moved. Thalara stepped forward slowly. Who are you? The voice answered. I am Silence, last enforcer of the code. I am here to end your corruption. Raylan stepped in front of her. Tom, you'll have to go through me first. Silence raised one hand, and the ground split beneath Raylan's feet, throwing him back against a wall, his body slamming into stone with a sickening crack. Thalara cried out, rushing to him, but Raylan gritted his teeth and stood again, blood running down his face. I said, you'll have to go through me. The defenders gathered behind them, weapons raised, ready to face whatever came. Thalara turned to them, her voice rising. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us. The Null Order wants to erase anything that doesn't fit their perfect code. But life doesn't work like that. Life is change, growth. We are the future, not them. The defenders roared in reply, and the final battle began. The Null forces surged forward again, but this time they were met with fire and fury, and Thalara moved like lightning, her power no longer wild, but sharp, focused, and Raylan fought beside her, his rifle never missing, his will never breaking. Silence stepped into the fray. Every strike from the defenders deflected. Every blast turned aside until he reached Thalara and struck with a blade made of dark energy. She blocked it with a shield of light, the impact shaking the air, and there, battle became a dance of fire and shadow, each strike cracking the sky, each moment dragging the stars closer to Earth. Raylan saw her falter and ran to her side, catching her as Silence lifted the blade again. But before the strike fell, Thalara screamed. Not in fear, but in defiance, and her light exploded in a brilliant pulse that swallowed the entire battlefield. When the light faded, Silence was gone. The Null forces retreated. And the field was silent once more, filled only with the breathing of the living and the ashes of the fallen. Thalara collapsed in Raylan's arms, her glow dim, her breath shallow. Did we win? She asked weakly. Raylan held her close. We're still here. That's something. Far above them, the sky began to clear, and for the first time in days, stars shone down on the broken pass, silent witnesses to a battle that had changed everything. They didn't know what came next, whether the Null Order would return, or whether other enemies waited in the dark, but for now, they had each other and a hope that refused to die. Beneath the silver sky, as ashes of the battle still drifted across Twilight Pass, Thalara lay silent in Raylan's arms, while the wind carried the scent of scorched metal and broken earth. But the peace that had come after the battle was thin and trembling like a thread, ready to snap, for even though Silence had vanished and the Null forces had fallen back, Raylan knew deep down this wasn't the end. It was only a pause before something worse. As night slipped in, the defenders built small fires among the ruined walls, tending to their wounds and burying the dead, while whispering stories of the battle that had just saved them from oblivion. And Raylan, though exhausted and bruised, kept his eyes on Thalara, whose light had dimmed to a faint shimmer, her breathing slow but steady. He stayed beside her as others came to offer thanks or ask what would come next, and he had no answers, only questions about the blood in her veins, about the power she barely understood, and about the strange energy that had protected them. All. Then, just before dawn, she stirred, her eyes opening slowly, not silver now, but a soft violet, filled with quiet pain and burning questions. Did they leave? She asked, voice barely a whisper, and Raylan nodded. For now. She sat up with effort and looked at the wounded defenders sleeping in scattered groups. Too many died. Raylan looked down. And more will, unless we finish this. Valera's fingers closed around a broken piece of crystal sheet, taken from the ruined chamber days ago, the same stone that had triggered her awakening, and she held it up to the firelight. There's something inside this ... A message I haven't unlocked yet. I think it might show us the way forward. Raylan nodded slowly. Then we find out what it's hiding. But they didn't have time. Before the sun fully rose, an alarm rang through the canyon's strange pulse from the West Ridge, where one of the scouts had vanished an hour earlier. Raylan and Thalara rushed to the spot and found the man unconscious. Strange burn marks on his chest, and beside him lay a small device unlike anything they had seen before. A black pyramid, humming with unstable power. Thalara bent close and touched the edge, and her body jolted with a surge of memory, not her own visions of a place buried deep underground, full of machines and broken codes, and a fractured voice whispering, "The flame is real. The fracture grows. The Starborn must choose." She pulled back, eyes wide, and said only 2 words, "The core." Raylan stared at her. "What is it?" Valera's voice shook. "The source of the Null Order's control. Network hidden beneath the surface of this world. Old and forgotten. It's breaking apart. And if it falls, the energy it holds could ignite half the planet." The defenders gathered quickly, and within an hour, a small team set out with Raylan and Thalara, leading the way across cracked terrain toward the location seen in her vision, massive crater hidden by cliffs, where ancient structures rose like broken teeth from the earth. As they reached the rim, they looked down into a pit of shadows where strange blue light flickered beneath clouds of dust. And at the center stood a tower, crumbling but alive, pulsing with energy. Thalara stepped forward, but a sudden voice echoed through the rocks, familiar, cold, and full of warning. "Starborn, you should not have come." Silence emerged again, not alone this time, but with others dressed in armor marked with the Null sigil. Warriors, once Serati, but now twisted by purpose and fear, their faces hidden behind masks of black steel. Raylan raised his weapon, but Thalara stopped him. "This place doesn't belong to them. It belongs to all of us." She stepped forward, and the ground trembled again as the tower responded to her presence. A bridge formed from light, spanning the crater to the tower's base, and she began to cross it, slowly, while the others watched from behind cover, unsure whether to follow or flee. Silence did not move. If you reach the flame, you risk everything. The fracture was sealed for a reason. Thalara turned her head slightly. "Because your kind feared what we could become." Silence replied, "Because your kind almost destroyed the galaxy." But Thalara kept walking, and Raylan followed her, side by side, across the light bridge that swayed under their feet as power surged around them, calling something ancient back to life. Inside the tower, the air was thick with pressure, as if the walls themselves were holding back a storm, and they passed rooms filled with dark machinery, glowing runes, and shattered pods that once held beings lost to time. At the top, they found at the core, a sphere of energy floating above a platform, wrapped in tendrils of code and flame, pulsing like a living heart. Kala approached it slowly, and as she drew close, her skin began to glow again, brighter than ever, her body trembling. "It knows me," she whispered. "It remembers." Raylan stepped closer. "What do you see?" She reached out and touched the surface of the core, and in that instant, images burst into her mind. Again, a war older than any human history. A choice made by the Serati to split their bloodline, to preserve power through order and silence, to erase anyone who defied the plan. She saw her own origin, created by a hidden sect of rebels, her blood carrying both hope and danger, locked away for centuries until the stars aligned again. And she saw the truth: if the core shattered now, it would release not just energy, but a signal calling others like her across the stars, awakening ancient powers and ending the control of the Null Order once and for all. But it would also draw enemies beyond imagining. She pulled her hand back, gasping, "I can't do it alone." Raylan placed his hand beside hers. "Then don't." Their touch triggered the final sequence, and the core began to fracture. Cracks of light spreading across its surface while the tower shook violently. Silence appeared again in a burst of shadows, shouting a warning, but it was too late. The core exploded, not in fire, but in light, spreading waves of energy across the land. The tower crumbled around them, but the bridge reformed beneath their feet, and Raylan dragged Alara out, just as the ground behind them collapsed into fire. Above them, the sky lit up with lines of glowing symbols, ancient calls sent into space, a signal no longer buried. Valerie collapsed in his arms again, drained, barely conscious. Raylan looked down at her and whispered, "What now?" Her eyes opened, glowing with starlight. "Now they're coming." Far above the world, beyond the black edge of space, old powers began to stir, some in awe, some in anger, drawn by the flame that had just been lit by two souls who refused to bow to fate. The air was still as smoke rose gently from the ruins of the tower that once guarded the core, and across the sky, strange lights shimmered like falling stars, remnants of the energy pulse that Alara and Raylan had awakened. Yet this was no longer just about survival or rebellion. This was the beginning of something much bigger, something that reached beyond their war-torn world and into the dark spaces between the stars, where old empires slept and ancient eyes had begun to open, drawn by the signal that was never meant to be heard. Alara lay, weak in Raylan's arms at the edge of the crater, her skin glowing faintly and her breath slow but steady. And even as Raylan tried to speak, tried to ask if she was still the same after what she had done, she looked up at him with eyes that now carried the reflection of stars, calm, steady, and filled with the strange certainty. "They're coming," she said again, but her voice no longer held fear, it carried weight, like a promise, and Raylan helped her to her feet as the ground trembled softly beneath them. Not with danger, but with something stirring far below the surface. Around them, the few remaining defenders gathered, wounded and weary, their eyes wide as they saw the way the sky had changed. The way Alara now glowed brighter with every passing second, as if the energy she had unleashed was not burning her up, but becoming a part of her, shaping her into something entirely new. As dawn broke, the light revealed more than just broken stone. It showed change. The winds carried not only ash, but whispers, words in languages no one had spoken in centuries, carried through the air by the signal that continued to pulse quietly across the planet's crust, deep into space. Raylan and Alara returned to Twilight Pass with the others, where temporary shelters had been raised, and a quiet tension filled the air. People no longer knew what came next, and even the bravest among them looked to the horizon with wary eyes, wondering whether they had brought peace or destruction. Alara spent the next 2 days in silence, her body wrapped in robes woven from the energy cloth of the core, her skin now marked with faint lines of light like constellations across her arms. And she sat alone for long hours, meditating, learning how to control the power flowing inside her, not just for defense, but for connection, for awakening the hidden web that linked her to others like her across the stars. Raylan stayed close, but gave her space, watching over the camp, keeping order, fixing broken weapons, and trying to act like everything was normal, when deep inside he felt like the universe was shifting under his feet. Then, on the third night, the sky cracked open, not with thunder or storm, but with ships, silent and dark, moving like shadows across the stars, dozens of them forming a ring around the planet. No alarms were triggered, no shots were fired, and yet everyone felt their presence, as if the air itself held its breath. Alara walked out from the main tent, her glow brighter now, her eyes locked on the sky. And as one of the ships descended massive and shaped like a crescent moonet, opened in the center to reveal a single figure floating down on beams of light. The figure was tall, cloaked in silver and blue, with no visible face. But its voice echoed like music and thunder combined. "We are the sentinels of the deep stars. The signal has been heard. The Starborn has awakened. The council calls her forth." Gasps filled the camp, and some dropped to their knees, while others backed away in fear. But the Lara stepped forward alone, lifting her chin. "I am the Lara of the Serati. I was made. In secret, I carry the blood of two worlds. I do not answer to councils. Why have you come?" The sentinel bowed its head slightly. "Not to command, to witness, to guide, if permitted. You have ignited the flame. That choice cannot be undone. But others will follow, some to join you, others to destroy you." Raylan stepped aside. "Her. What do you want from her?" The sentinel turned to him. "Nothing. She must choose what to become. But the galaxy will no longer ignore the Starborn." As the figure returned to its ship, the sky shimmered again, and a second wave of energy pulsed from the ruins of the tower, this time reaching deeper, beyond known space, and suddenly more ships appeared. But these were not silent or calm. They came fast, sharp, black like knives, and within moments, read alarms flashed through the camp. "Null signature detected," someone yelled. "Multiple vessels inbound. Interference with our comms. They're jamming everything." Raylan grabbed his gear, his face hard. "They're coming to finish what silence could not." Dala raised one hand, her body glowing like fire now, and said, "Then let them come." She stepped forward, not to hide, but to face the skies as no dropships entered the atmosphere, raining down like meteors. But just as they reached the edge of the pass, the ground split open and a wave of energy rose around the camp like a Duma barrier summoned not by machines but by the Lara herself, her will now shaping reality in ways no one fully understood. The first wave of attackers struck the barrier and vanished in a flash of blue light, and the rest hesitated, unsure how to proceed, as if their code could not comprehend this new force. Inside the dome, the Lara's body hovered slightly above the ground, her arms outstretched, her voice speaking in a language Raylan did not know, and yet he understood every word. "This is not your world. This is not your time. I am the flame and the fracture. I am born of choice. I'm not alone." At her words, beams of light shot down from the sentinel ships above, striking the ground beside her, and from those beams stepped others, beings from distant systems, all marked with glowing patterns like hers, all different in form, but united by the same energy, the same blood, the same power. The Starborn had arrived. Raylan watched in awe as the null forces began to fall back, their strategy broken, their logic fractured by what they could not predict or control. The battle did not last long, not because the Starborn fought with violence, but because they stood as proof of a future that the Null Order had denied for centuries, and faced with the truth, the enemy faltered. By dawn, the sky cleared again, and the ships were gone, leaving behind only silence and wonder. The defenders stood together, not just as survivors, but as witnesses to something greater than war. The Lara stepped down from the air, her glow now gentle, her form stable. She looked at Raylan, smiled, and said quietly, "It's time to build, not destroy." Raylan reached for her hand. "Then let's build something worth keeping." The other Starborn gathered around them, forming a circle, not of command, but of unity. And as the sun rose over the new world, a single thought echoed across minds and stars alike. This was not the end of the story, but the birth of something that would reshape the galaxy forever.